In this video, I wanted to find out two things. One was like to game on the M1 Max, and the second is what if I use my M1 Max internal hardware to create the video. That means only using this webcam and then only using the microphone array that it has. Apple has advertised this as being podcast worthy or studio worthy, I can't remember, but either way, I wanted to put it through its paces on two ends, and I hope that this doesn't bite this video's quality in the metaphorical ass. So, the M1 Max comes in two different GPU configurations. This one, the one I'm using, is the 24-core, and it also comes in the 32-core variant as well. That obviously is more powerful, and the scaling of performance on the M1 Maxes is roughly linear. It's just straight across. The more cores, the more performance, and it scales quite nicely. When you compare this using Geekbench 5's metal benchmarks, it comes out that the 24-core is roughly that of an AMD 5700, and the 32-core is roughly that of a 5700 XT. So this isn't a perfect analogy, but it gives you a ballpark expectation of what we can expect out of this. But the Mac gaming scene is not great, as we all know, and that's what I wanted to talk about in this video about your gaming options. Man, that's sharp. For most Mac owners looking to play the latest selection of games meant booting Windows, which has the world's largest library of games. The M1 Max currently does not have this ability, although Apple has said that they'll allow for dual booting, but it's on Microsoft. There is an ARM version of Microsoft Windows 11, but it can be only run as a virtual machine on the Mac for now. That may change, and more on that in a bit. First, let's start with the easiest way to play games on the Mac, which is to play games that were natively written for the Mac or ported to the Mac. Sadly, the selection of games has been famously slim. We have the Mac App Store, Steam, and of course you can buy games direct from publishers. Adding to the complexity of Mac gaming is Apple's habit of breaking support. To use an example, Halo was originally written for PowerPC Macs. Halo received an update to convert it to a universal binary so it could be run on PowerPC and Intel Macs. Even this level of support was not enough for Halo to stick around. Mac gamers were not able to launch Halo under macOS Mavericks 10.9 without using unofficial fan-made hacks. Since then, there's been plenty of more hurdles. The biggest two have been Apple dropped support for OpenGL in macOS 10.14 Mojave, and in macOS 10.15 Catalina, they dropped support for 32-bit apps. The end result is the Mac has never been able to amass much of a library of games. My Steam library is filled with indie titles that do not work with my M1 Max because of this. Even AAA titles are not immune. When I tried to run Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, I found out during the making of this video that it was 32-bit, thus could not run. The pain just doesn't end for Mac gamers. Right now, as of recording this video, there are almost no games that are dual binaries for Apple Silicon and Intel Macs. Almost any game on the market currently is written for Intel Macs, meaning that it must use Rosetta to translate Intel instructions to Apple Silicon. This incurs a performance hit, but of all things considered, it runs pretty well. I tested out Rise of the Tomb Raider, World of Goo, and Dirt Rally, and my experience was just alright. I feel almost obligated to mention that Apple Arcade exists. Apple Arcade offers a selection of games that are mobile-ish in quality, and they all include Mac native ports. Some of these Mac ports feel like afterthoughts, and some are done better than others. Apple Arcade mostly focuses on casual gaming, so it's not what everyone's looking for. There are a few gems like Sneaky Sasquatch and What the Golf. You can also download some iOS games from the App Store, and I say some because most publishers are smart enough not to let you do this. This is not a fun experience as the touchscreen and the mouse and keyboard are not analogous to each other. Our next option to play games is Parallels, which will let you install Windows 11 ARM Preview, which has its own Rosetta-like features that let you run 32-bit and 64-bit games, but its compatibility is a bit of a grab bag. Many, if not most of the latest and greatest games will not work, and the results can be pretty mixed even when you get a game to run. Parallels posted a semi-helpful FAQ on its website. It reads as follows: does the game require DirectX 12? If so, then the game probably won't run in a VM. Does the game require one of a few specific video cards? If so, then the game probably won't run in a VM. Was the game released in the past few months? If so, the game may not run in a VM or on a Windows PC you bought in the last year. What the hell? That's not really accurate. Oh well. Otherwise, it is likely that the game will run in a VM. Personally, I would have also included the note that games that use modern anti-cheat software probably won't work in a virtualized environment, as the cheating software will see this as a problem. To download the Windows 11 ARM version requires a free Microsoft developer account. Then you can download a VHDX file. After that, it's a matter of using Parallels to install Windows, which is supremely easy. This seems to be as good a place as any to talk about why we can't use Boot Camp. Right now, there's a rumor that Microsoft has an exclusivity deal with Qualcomm that's set to expire soon. I really sincerely hope we get native ability to boot Windows, because Parallels is expensive and they switched to a subscription model. Can we just stop with this already? I use Steam primarily for my testing because that's the game library I have. I found that most simple games like Bridge Constructor, which incidentally has a Mac port, or Parkosaurus ran flawlessly. Whereas when I tested a game like Far Cry 1, I was only able to get to the menus, then it refused to run. And Saints Row the Third ran roughly about half speed or half frame rate, regardless of what resolution or graphics settings I was using. In stark contrast, a game like Just Cause 2 ran perfectly, and Call of Juarez Gunslinger ran well. Fortunately, there is a website that's attempting to demystify this process called Apple Gaming Wiki. That's an ever-expanding list of Mac games and their compatibility under Apple Silicon. During the making of this video, I contributed a few entries, as I thought I'd save someone else the heartache of downloading an 80GB game only to find out it quits on launch like I did with Middle-earth: Shadow of War. You can find a link to this website in the description of this video. I also wanted to provide 3D Mark benchmarks too, but I found out 3D Mark does not run under Windows ARM, save the cross-platform tests, and even those failed to run under Parallels. The last vector we have to run Windows games is Crossover. Some Mac gamers might be already familiar with Crossover, but Crossover is based on Wine, which stands for Wine is not an emulator. Wine is instead an open source compatibility layer designed to run Windows apps on Unix-like systems. This gives us another angle to run games, although it can be more difficult than even Parallels, as there's a little more headroom and chance for error. I tried Far Cry using Crossover to see if I'd get any better results, and I did not. Which is to say, it just runs okay. Crossover's a little strange, as you're installing dependencies for libraries that Windows uses, and then on top of that, Steam to run Steam games. This also means that the compatibility can take some really weird turns, and I've seen people complain they've had to use pirated copies of games they actually own in Crossover to get them to work, because the copy protection stops them from running them under Crossover. Like Parallels, Apple Gaming Wiki lists games tested in Crossover. The last path for gaming is the legally gray area of emulation, and the Mac has a pretty great lineup of mature emulators. My personal pick is OpenEMU, which emulates a huge roster of retro game consoles, but currently has bugs under Monterey. I'm sure those will get resolved in due time, as it ran great under my M1 Air with Big Sur. I've made a few videos about emulation already on this channel, including one about emulating Mac OS 9 using QEMU on an M1 to play SimCity 2000, linked in the description of this video, and one about OpenEMU and arcade emulation, also linked in the description. And there are plenty of other emulators too, like Dolphin, which emulates both Wii and GameCube games and has a Mac native port. The Dolphin emulator is maturing at this point, and its compatibility is getting pretty far and expansive. Plus, you can play the games at higher quality than they originally were for the GameCube and Wii. The website also lists the compatibility, so you don't have to do a lot of guessing checking. Windows still has a considerable edge in emulation as there's just more emulators out there for it. For absurdity, I tried to use PCSX to emulate PlayStation 2 games in Windows ARM 11 Preview in Parallels, but the results weren't very good. So by now you've pieced together my conclusion, which is gaming on the Apple Silicon isn't great, but you can still manage the game if you're willing to tolerate a Class B experience. Apple is not friendly to gaming because of this inability to maintain compatibility with old applications, which is entirely the polar opposite of Microsoft, where you can run games written for Windows 95 using methods to bypass security and even compatibility layers. When I started this video, I had the great idea that I would be benchmarking Tomb Raider in crossover and parallels, and then the native Mac version, and comparing the benchmark results. But that quickly failed because I was not even able to run Tomb Raider in 720p in parallels regardless of what settings I used. I tried high, then low. Our best hope for gaming on the Apple Silicon is Microsoft if they bring Windows 11 to Apple Silicon and it has proper drivers. If that happens, we too might be running both current and Windows 95 games without the friction of dealing with virtualization or wine. Now that I'm pretty deep into this bottle, I figured this is a good place to close out on, and I hope the experimental portion of using only my M1 Max's internal hardware was not too annoying. Yeah, that's tough. Anyhow, let me know if you thought this worked out or not. Thanks.